What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with the big gunplay updates this week in Battlefield 6, we saw several key changes across the board to the weapons that have really been a game changer as far as how the gunplay feels. And while I've already covered all of the recoil and spread changes as well as the body multiplier changes, there's one last key element to cover here that changed across the board, and this is muzzle velocity and more importantly, bullet drag. So today we're going to be diving deep into that, looking at how bullet drop has changed, so how high do you have to aim on your target at various ranges, as well as how much you're going to have to lead your target now if you're shooting at somebody that's running perpendicular to you within various ranges with different weapons. And this is actually quite important, as I'm sure many of you have already noticed when trying to take long-range engagements. Things have definitely changed here, and you will have to adjust your point of aim accordingly if you want to be hitting those targets at longer ranges. So diving right in, let's start off with the basics. You guys might have noticed in the patch notes, they adjusted velocity on, I believe, every single gun in the game. And for most of the weapons, we saw a reduction to our muzzle velocity of roughly 4 to 7%, with the odd outlier that will fall outside of those ranges. But that's roughly the reduction that we saw, which isn't anything too major. However, the other big change they made here that's far more important when you get to longer ranges especially is bullet drag. They have adjusted the drag coefficient values, and this value determines how quickly your bullet loses velocity over distance. And by default, the standard drag coefficient value in this game was 0.0025, now it's 0.0035. And keep in mind, a higher value here means your bullet loses velocity faster. And then for our match grade ammo on sniper rifles and DMRs, this was previously 0.001 and now it's 0.002. And those numbers on their own probably don't mean a whole lot for you. So let's get into our average bullet drop over distance with the various weapon types. So keep in mind here, I'm just taking the average velocity value for the SMGs, for instance. We'll start it off with that since it has the lowest velocity values for primary weapons. And this particular graph is showing how much bullet drop you will see, assuming we're zeroed at 0 meters, which isn't the case in game, but it's just for simplicity's sake to allow you to see the difference and how much that difference changes over range as well. And as we can see, pre-patch, over a distance of 300 meters, we would see just under 3 meters of drop, whereas now with the reduction to velocity values, as well as the increase to our drag coefficient, we now see about 5 meters of bullet drop over 300 meters with an average SMG. So that is quite a big difference if you're looking at those very extreme ranges. Keep in mind, of course, if we're looking at like 100 meters, which most of your gunfights should be falling well within 100 meters for SMGs at least. In those cases, we're really not noticing that much of a difference in bullet drop, and that's because the coefficient is the primary thing that changed here, and that coefficient works over time. So the more time the bullet is in the air, the more time that drag has had an impact on your bullet. But this at least goes to show that if you do get into those situations where you really want to stretch things out with an SMG, it is going to have quite a big impact. But next up for carbines, we have higher velocity values across the board. And as a result, you are going to be seeing less drop, but you can still see there is a discrepancy that grows as the distance grows when it comes to the amount of bullet drop you experience with this. And therefore, again, if you're keeping yourself within 100 meters, no problem. But at extreme ranges, you will notice quite a big difference there. Then after that, we have LMGs. And again, of course, same trend across the board here. The longer the range, the more of a difference you're going to be noticing. As for assault rifles, the averages are actually very, very similar to LMGs. Like they're almost identical here. So same story. Then after that, we have DMRs, which are going to be experiencing less drop due to their higher velocity values. And then surprisingly, our base velocities are actually a bit slower on sniper rifles compared to DMRs, so we're actually seeing a bit more drop. However, our potential values tend to be much higher on the sniper rifles due to their ammo types and extended barrels. And just to highlight the differences here overall, these are all of the weapon types ranked accordingly, and this is what their bullet drop over 300 meters looked like pre-patch, whereas now this is what it looks like post-patch. And you can see it really does drop off quite a bit faster there when you are getting to those much longer ranges. So that is a nice way to illustrate just how much things have changed. Obviously, bullet drop isn't everything. You're also factoring in bullet travel time. But as far as just displaying it on a graph, it looks better. It's easier to read when looking at bullet drop. However, in order to account for travel time as well, which is a very important value if we're looking at how much we have to lead a moving target, I wanted to display that in a slightly different way, by showing exactly how much you have to lead your target at various ranges in order to hit your target pre-patch versus post-patch. And keep in mind with this is assuming the enemy player is sprinting perfectly perpendicular to you at various ranges. Obviously, if it's not perfectly perpendicular or they're moving at a slower speed, then all of this will change. So this does give a nice illustration of the differences, but in most in-game experiences, you're not looking at somebody perfectly perpendicular sprinting to you, so you will still have to adjust to that and feel it out for yourself. And then also, of course, this graphic is not looking at bullet drop at all. We're just looking at how much you have to lead your target. And as we can see with assault rifles, up close, there's basically no difference whatsoever, and that's because the reduction that we saw to our initial muzzle velocity is very minor. It's mainly the drag coefficient that affects this, and as I said before, that adds up over time as the bullet travels through the air. So with the average assault rifle, you can really start to see the differences here at about 150 meters, although even then, if you're using the same point of aim or the same amount of leading as pre-patch, you still might hit your target in that case. But once you get out to about 200 meters, this is where, if you're using the pre-patch amount of leading, you likely won't be hitting your target anymore. You'll be hitting right behind them. And with this, I'm not going to go through every single weapon type, but I wanted to show the contrast here as we fade from assault rifles into SMGs. And this is where you really start to notice a big difference. With SMGs, even at 100 meters, you might have to adjust your point of aim a little bit on a target that's sprinting perpendicular. And then once you get out to 150 meters, you definitely have to be changing how much you're leading. And that gap just keeps growing and growing as you continue stretching your range out even more. So you can see this really did hit SMGs quite hard if you're looking at very long-range engagements well beyond the intended use of an SMG. And this, I think, is a great way to keep SMGs in check because pre-patch, they were a little too beamy at longer ranges, and that's coming from somebody that primarily used SMGs, and I love SMGs. They definitely didn't have enough downsides, in my opinion, at longer ranges, considering the fact that they have very little aim down sight spread and very little recoil for the most part as well. So now, post-patch, this is a huge consideration if you plan on stretching beyond your intended ranges with an SMG. You can still hit your targets, but you're going to have to lead quite a bit more. Now with this, I'm sure a lot of you guys are primarily thinking about sniper rifles here, because that's what you generally should be using when we're looking at extreme long ranges, and therefore you should see this come into play far more often in your gunfights. And so I wanted to start this off with the average base sniper rifle. So this is assuming you're using the base barrel, not the extended barrel, as well as the standard ammo, not the match grade ammo. And in this case, you can see even at 100 meters, you're going to have to lead a little bit different if you're trying to hit that headshot just right on somebody that's sprinting. And we see that same trend where that gap between pre-patch and post-patch keeps growing and growing as you continue stretching out your ranges, to the point where at like 300 meters, for instance, the difference in how much you have to lead is huge with a base sniper rifle, pre-patch versus post-patch. But of course, for anybody that takes sniping seriously and has their sniper rifle leveled up, you're not going to be using the base barrel and the standard ammunition. You're likely going to be using the extended barrel as well as the match grade ammunition, at least for a long-range sniper build. And so let's take a look at that specifically with the M2010, just because I had all the pre-patch data for attachments on that as well. And so with this is assuming you're using the extended barrel and the match grade ammunition. And as you can see, this definitely shrinks how much you have to lead your target, as well as the gaps between pre-patch and post-patch, until you start getting out to, again, about 300, 400 meters. That's where drag coefficient really comes into play super, super heavily. And even with this combination of attachments, you will have to lead quite a bit more post-patch compared to pre-patch with those same attachments. This is still going to be a huge upgrade from not using those attachments, by the way. So you won't have to lead nearly as much, but you still have to factor this in, and you will have to make an adjustment compared to what you did pre-patch. And overall, again, I think this is great. I definitely felt like sniping was just kind of boring pre-patch, because for the most part, it was just point and click on their heads. Unless you were looking at like insanely long range snipes. For the most part, in my experience, it was basically just point and click. And that was partially due to the lack of bullet drop, but also due to the fact that you just didn't have to lead your target all that much in most cases. Whereas now, there's a little bit more skill behind that. You have to actually account for that bullet drop and that extra lead time in order to get that perfect shot. And that's going to make sniping so much more satisfying after this update. And I'm actually really looking forward to diving in and sniping a whole lot more now, because it's going to be that much more satisfying to hit that perfectly led, perfectly dropped shot right onto their head as they're sprinting at like 200 or 300 meters. And I've got to say, out of all of the changes that they've made to gunplay in general, I actually think I like these changes the most. The other changes they've made are a little controversial. Some people are unhappy that they reduce recoil, but then just increase the amount of spread you experience. So you're still experiencing a similar amount of randomness. It's just now you don't see the randomness as much as you saw it before. And then a lot of people are also not really happy with how they handled the limb multipliers and lower torso multipliers as well. But in the case of velocity, I think this is just a straight upgrade across the board. I love the fact that we have to actually think about these things, and it is going to make it that much more difficult to be effectively hitting your target, especially moving targets at very long ranges, which is going to reduce the number of situations where you just get beamed by somebody at like 200 meters while you're sprinting perpendicular to them. And it's like they don't even have to consider bullet drop, leading, or any of that. They just put their reticle on target and destroy you. Now, of course, the other gunplay changes do come into play there as well, with the increased spread, as well as the limb multipliers. It's more likely they're going to have to take that extra bullet to kill you, and it's more likely they're going to be missing some shots at those ranges. But when it comes to this velocity and change to the drag coefficient, I'm really happy with what they've done here. Now, of course, these are just my opinions, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this in those comments down below. Are you guys generally happy with the velocity and, more importantly, the drag coefficient adjustments? Or maybe not. Do you guys think they took this too far, or maybe not far enough? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.